Imagine you are standing ankle-deep in river mud, not as a warrior, not as a chief, but as a person who knows the taste of fish oil on the fingers and the sting of reed cuts on the palm. You feel the night tighten. You hear the small sounds that always exist: frogs, water, distant birds, but tonight those sounds sit under something heavier. Something is wrong in the way the dark holds still. You are not alone. You see the camp breathing around the firelight, families close together, baskets of dried meat, scraped hides, nets hung to dry. You smell smoke and old river weed. You feel that familiar ache in the shoulders from hauling boats. But tonight the ache is different because the air feels watched. The hair on the arms rises as if an invisible hand drags fingers along the skin. A child bursts in from the stones. Bare feet slap grit. His chest heaves too fast. His eyes are too wide. He points upriver with a shaking hand that cannot choose one direction because fear makes directions blur. He tries to speak, but the tongue fails. Only a sound comes out: click, click, like flint striking flint, like teeth chattering in cold. Normal life breaks in half. Not with a speech, not with a warning, with a child who cannot find words. You move without permission from thought. You climb the bank. Gravel bites the toes. You crouch at the edge and look. You see them. Dots on the ridge. Too still to be hunters' stalking game. Too many to be a family moving camp. Shapes that do not wander. Shapes that hold. Shapes that wait. A whisper snaps behind you. Scouts see only a handful. Another voice swears it is a whole band. Conflicting numbers. Conflicting futures. And there is no time to count because counting requires calm. Then the first arrow drops into the sand between your feet. Not thrown. Shot. From far. The shaft quivers like a living thing. The point is stone, small, sharp, made to split flesh. You smell nothing special, but you feel everything change. You feel the crack in the chest before the mind understands it. This is not a raid for food. This is organized killing. A second arrow thuds into a basket. It hits with a dry punch and makes the basket jump. Someone screams. Someone grabs a child and runs the wrong way. You shout for the elders. You grab a bundle of reed shafts because that is what hands know. The hands do not know shields, but hands know grabbing, pulling, dragging, tying. You do not know if defending family happens tonight or stepping into a massacre that already begins happens tonight. You pull the camp into motion. Not as a plan, but as a desperate shape of survival. You drag boats closer to the waterline. You kick the fire into ash so light does not paint every face as a target. You press a palm over a crying mouth, not cruelty, but the brutal math of sound. If the ridge hears the crying, the ridge knows where to aim. The river is a highway, therefore it seems like escape. But the river is also a trap. The banks pinch into choke points. Stones force narrow paths. Reeds snag ankles. Therefore movement becomes a line. Lines are for arrows. Someone yanks a skin bundle and spills flint flakes across the ground. A child trips on them and falls. A mother reaches down. Therefore both bodies pause, and an arrow hisses past and thuds into the mud where a throat hovers a heartbeat ago. You feel the closeness of death as a pressure, like a hand on the back of the neck. Two fast runners dart off to circle the ridge. They move like deer, low, fast, feet learning every rock. But rock betrays everyone eventually. They return with different stories because fear makes witnesses unreliable. One says attackers are close, already sliding down the rocks, already cutting off the upriver bend. The other says attackers are farther, waiting, stalking, herding like animals toward the water. You do not get a clean answer because the past does not give clean answers. You only get fear and the sound of arrows that arrive before the eyes can find the shooter. Logistics become the enemy. The elderly cannot run. Therefore someone must carry them. But carrying makes a target taller. Therefore carrying invites arrows. The wounded from the first volley slow everyone. Therefore the group bunches up. But bunching creates the perfect aim point. The boats cannot carry all at once. Therefore, somebody must stay on land while others push off. But staying on land means standing in the open. You see a man trying to lift a boat with two others. The boat sticks in mud. He grunts, face red. Then an arrow hits his thigh and the grunt turns into a sound like air leaving a punctured skin. He collapses sideways, hands still clinging to the boat as if the boat is a promise. You feel the helpless anger rise because the arrow does not argue. It only arrives. Someone tries to improvise cover. Woven mats. Basket lids. A hide stretched over a frame. Therefore, a few bodies crouch behind thin protection. But the microlith-tipped arrows slice through light cover like it is air. A shaft punches through woven reeds and comes out the other side with blood already on it. You start to recognize a rhythm of shooting. Not random. Coordinated. Arrows come in clusters, not as individual accidents. Someone up there calls a cadence you cannot hear, and the arrows answer together. You see a teenager, still more child than adult, trying to be brave. He lifts a long pole like a spear. He steps forward, exposing himself, thinking courage is enough. But courage does not stop a projectile. An arrow hits his ribs and he folds in half, eyes shocked, hands suddenly trying to hold in breath like breath spills out with blood. You feel your stomach twist because this is not hunting. This is people doing this to people. A voice in the camp shouts to split, half go down river, half go into the reeds. Therefore bodies scatter. But scattering means some run alone. Therefore some become easy targets. A woman sprinting with a bundle on her back stumbles, and the bundle shifts and reveals a baby face for one awful second. An arrow slams into the ground beside her head, so close the dirt sprays her cheek. You grab her arm and pull. You feel the slickness of sweat and fear. You yank her behind an overturned boat. The boat smells of wetwood and fish. The baby whimpers, then stops as if even the baby senses the rule. Silence equals survival. Another volley hisses. You hear it before you see it, that thin, fast whisper of air cut by stone points. A basket carrier goes down, low hit, pelvis height. He drops without a sound, legs folding as if bones suddenly turn to water. A defender raises an arm, instinctive shield with bare bone. An arrow catches the forearm. You hear the hit, wet, then hard. The arm bends wrong. A perifracture, though no word exists here for it, the body understands the message. These attackers practice this. You look up again. Now the ridge makes sense in a terrible way. It is not a line of hunters. It is a firing platform. They are spaced. They cover angles. They do not chase, they shape movement. You see one shooter stand, loose, drop. Another rises in a different place, loose, drop. Therefore, return fire becomes impossible because there is no single target, only a pattern. But a pattern is more deadly than a single man because a pattern does not get tired. Now it grows close enough for thrown stones, for screams that finally carry clearly. Shapes rush down, clubs, spears, flint blades strapped to wood, hands gripping like claws. The distance collapses. You swing a pole. It connects with a shoulder. You feel the jolt run up the arms. The attacker stumbles, but does not flee. He lunges again, because he expects resistance. You are fighting not one enemy, but a system, distance weapons to break the group, close weapons to finish it. A stone hits someone beside you. The sound is dull, like fruit dropped. The person's knees buckle and blood runs from the scalp into the eyes. Therefore, the person cannot see. But blindness in a crowd becomes a death sentence. Another attacker steps in and drives a flint edge into the side. It is quick. It is practiced. You feel breath rasping in your own throat. Not from running, but from terror. The lungs forget how to take air smoothly. The heart slams as if trying to break out. Someone near the water falls and does not rise. Someone tries to crawl and gets struck again. Therefore, it is not a single strike in panic, but repeated violence happens with intent. You see the rhythm. Hit, watch, hit again. Not to scare. To erase. A child runs toward the reeds. An arrow hits the child's back. The small body jerks forward and lies face down. The legs kick once, twice, then stop. You feel a howl build in the chest, but sound draws death, so the howl stays trapped behind teeth. Someone grabs a club and charges uphill. Therefore, there is a moment of boldness. But boldness meets altitude and arrows. The runner takes a shaft in the shoulder, spins, drops. The ridge answers any challenge with distance. A boat finally slides free. 2 people shove it into water. Therefore, there is hope. But hope creates focus, and focus creates tunnel vision. An arrow hits one of the pushers in the lower back. The body arches, hands still on wood. The boat keeps moving, but the person does not. Therefore, the boat becomes a moving betrayal, escape that costs a life. You do not know if reinforcements arrive. You do not know if another group flanks from the reeds. You do not know if the enemy numbers 20 or 50 or more. You only know the next breath might be the last, and people around you die in patterns. A spear thrusts toward the belly. You twist aside. The spear scrapes the hip, tears skin. The pain is hot and immediate. Therefore, the body wants to curl up. But curling up makes you small and easy to finish. You force legs to stay under you. A flint blade flashes. It is not metal, but it is sharper than fear. It slices a forearm when you block. Blood runs fast, right? The hand goes numb. Therefore, grip weakens. But weakness is read instantly by eyes trained to hunt humans. You shove the attacker back with the pole. The attacker slips in mud, but recovers. Behind him, another closes in. Therefore, you are not dueling. You are being surrounded. A shout erupts from behind. Someone calls for the elders, for any decision, any rule. But the elders cannot argue with arrows. Therefore, leadership becomes motion, not words. You drag a wounded person by the shoulders toward reeds. The body is heavy and limp. You feel ribs under skin, hear breath gurgle. But every second spent dragging means exposing your own back. An arrow thuds into the mud inches from your knee. You flinch, nearly let go. Therefore, you drag harder. The reeds begin. They cut the face. They catch hair. They hide bodies. Therefore, they feel like protection. But they also trap movement, and the sound of reeds shaking gives away position. You freeze. You hear footsteps in shallow water, soft slaps. You see a shadow through reed gaps. An attacker pushes in, slow, scanning. His eyes do not look wild. They look focused. Therefore, this is not a frenzy, but a method. A hand clamps on a child's arm nearby. The child muffles a cry. You see teeth bite lip to stop sound. You feel that same impulse. Silence becomes the last weapon. A volley comes again, but now it is lower, angled into reeds. Therefore, the enemy anticipates hiding. But anticipation means practice. A shaft punches into a reed stalk, then continues into flesh behind it. Someone gasps and folds. You push toward the water again because reeds fail. The river smells of life, but it also smells of rot along the bank. You see ripples where feet churn. Bodies shove. Hands grab. Therefore, the river becomes chaos. But chaos is what archers love, because chaos cannot coordinate defense. A man tries to swim with one arm because the other hangs useless. He kicks hard, face in water, coughing. An arrow hits his side while he floats half submerged. He jerks, mouth opening, swallowing river. Therefore, drowning joins the killing. You do not know if the arrow kills him or the river finishes the job. The result is the same. You find yourself behind the overturned boat again. The boat is scarred by impacts. You see arrows sticking from wood like quills. One shaft vibrates with each distant footstep. You press your back to wet planks and try to breathe without making sound. A child beside you stares at the arrows. The child reaches out as if to touch one, then stops, as if even curiosity becomes dangerous. The decisive minute arrives like a closing fist. Half the camp sits behind you, half still scrambling. You turn to count heads, mistake. Counting requires lifting up, peeking out. Therefore, you expose your side. A volley hisses. An arrow slams into the wood right where a face hovers a heartbeat ago. Another shaft cuts past your ear so close you feel air move. You flinch down, heart hammering. You realize the ridge has your range. Someone screams a name. The scream breaks into sobbing. Then the sobbing stops abruptly. Therefore, a life ends mid-sound. But the mind refuses to accept it, so it keeps searching for the voice that no longer exists. An attacker rushes the boat, trying to get around the edge. You thrust the pole. It catches him in the chest, drives him back. He spits, eyes furious. But he does not retreat. Therefore, this is commitment. Behind him, another attacker lifts a stone and throws. The stone clips your shoulder. The arm goes numb for a second. Therefore, the pole dips. But a dipping pole becomes an opening. The flint blade comes in. It stabs toward the ribs. You twist, and it slices along the side instead. Pain flares, warm blood spreading under skin. You feel the body wanting to fold. But folding means dying. Therefore, you shove again, harder, with all legs and hips. The attacker stumbles. He steps on an arrow shaft in the mud and slips. The irony is sickening. He falls, and for a heartbeat there is space. Therefore, you run. You sprint toward the waterline. You grab a small body, child or youth, and drag it with you. The small body fights at first, not understanding, then yields. The feet skid. Mud splashes. Behind, the camp collapses into scattered knots of desperate motion. A boat sits half afloat. 2 people cling to it. You push the small body into the boat. The boat wobbles. Someone reaches out, grabs wrist, pulls. Therefore, you have a chance. But a chance is not safety. Another volley arcs. The arrows thud into water with sharp little splashes. One arrow hits the boat's side and sticks. The wood shudders. A person screams and collapses inward. Therefore, the river is not escape. It is just a different killing ground. The boat pushes off anyway. Hands paddle. Feet kick. The current grips the hull. The bank slides away. But the ridge still sees you. Therefore, you crouch low, pressing face near wet boards, tasting river water and blood mixed together. On the shore, shapes move among bodies. Some attackers strike downward. Some pull arrows out to reuse. Therefore, the killing continues even when resistance ends. But from the boat, the details blur. Distance creates mercy only for the eyes, not for the mind. You do not know if the boat reaches safety. You do not know if a second group waits around the bend. You only know the sound of the camp fades, and the fading is not relief. It is absence. The noise thins. Not because peace arrives, because fewer mouths remain to scream. If you are still breathing, you rise later from hiding, from reeds, from whatever pocket of luck keeps you alive. Hands shake so hard a grip fails. You look for family in the wrong way, counting bodies before counting survivors. A face in the mud looks familiar. The face does not look back. The cost is everywhere. People with multiple wounds, like the body becomes a target board. People struck from distance, shafts still lodged in bone. People with defensive injuries, arms raised too late. Even the small ones, who never carry weapons at all, lie among the groan. You smell blood, river water, crushed reeds. Flies already gather, because nature does not wait for morning. Therefore, grief must compete with survival. But survival feels like betrayal. You crouch beside a body and see stone points still embedded. Some points sit deep, not like a lucky graze. Therefore, these arrows hit hard, straight, with practiced aim. You touch one shaft and feel it tremble, and the trembling runs into your fingers like a message. Humans do this with planning. You look for the elders. Maybe an elder lies face down. Maybe an elder stares at nothing. Therefore, leadership evaporates. But someone must decide what happens next, burn the dead, bury them, flee, hunt the attackers, beg for mercy. No answer arrives from the sky, only the pressure of the next day. You feel something worse than fear now. You feel knowledge. The knowledge that this violence is not an accident. this violence is a method that returns. You do not know the word massacre, but you feel its meaning. Organized killing, done to erase, done to teach a lesson through bodies. You move among the fallen, and the scene imprints itself into memory like a scar. But memory does not last forever because bodies become soil. Names fade. The river keeps flowing as if nothing happens. And now comes the time detective's curse. You cannot stay. You will become earth. Your pain will become evidence. Time accelerates without warning. The river keeps its secrets for thousands of years. Campfires turn to ash, then to dust, then to nothing. The reeds grow, die, regrow. The bank shifts. Sand covers bones. Silence becomes a lid. Then hands with tools break the ground in 1964 AD. You see the soil peel back. You see careful fingers lift fragments that once hold voices. The bones speak without sound. Stone microliths sit lodged in skeletons. Tiny points still there, still accusing. A skull shows a puncture that does not belong to accident. An arm shows a break that matches a raised defense. The graveyard looks less like natural death and more like a ledger of attacks, each wound a tally mark cut into human material. But the case refuses to close cleanly. The evidence argues with itself, like witnesses yelling over wind. Some bodies show fresh trauma, others show healed injuries. Therefore, the violence may not be a single day. But if wounds heal, then violence returns. Therefore, raids may stack across seasons, across years, until the cemetery becomes a map of repeated fear. So what stands here is not merely one catastrophe. What stands here is a pattern of group violence before cities, before kings, before writing. You see the truth in the bone. Coordination does not require a crown. Imagine standing beside the excavation trench. You see a rib with a point still inside it, as if the moment of impact never ends. You feel the distance collapse. 11,000 BC becomes close enough to touch. The neat story of progress feels flimsy, because here is strategy, here is teamwork, here is killing with intent, carved into skeletons. But uncertainty remains like fog that refuses to lift. Is this one catastrophic massacre, an ambush that wipes out a whole community in an hour of terror? But if it is one day, then the attackers bring enough planning and manpower to destroy a camp outright. Or is this many raids, violence that returns again and again until the dead pile up in one place? But if it is many raids, then the survivors keep coming back to the same river corridor, because the river gives life even when it also gives death. Either way, you stand at the blade's edge of human behavior. The bones do not tell you the names of the attackers. The bones do not tell you the argument that starts it. The bones only tell you that people learn to fight people as a group. You feel the question claw at the throat. What pressure turns neighbors into hunters? Hunger? Territory? A shrinking river? A harsh season that makes every fish matter and every reed boat a prize? The land does not speak. The dead do not point. Therefore, the mind fills gaps with guesses. But guesses do not remove the horror. Because in the end, the detail that burns is simple. You see distance weapons used not as random shots, but as tools to control movement. You see close weapons used not as defense, but as finishing. You see repeated strikes. You see defensive wounds. Therefore, the violence looks organized. That realization is the true wound that reaches across time. Not the arrow itself, but the knowledge behind the arrow. Now step back into the present. You hold a phone instead of a spear. You stand under electric light instead of firelight. But the human body remains the same: soft tissue, brittle bone, a mind that panics, a heart that races. You see the modern world talk about organized violence as if organization requires bureaucracy. But Jebel Sahaba whispers a colder truth. Organized killing does not require empires. It requires pressure, borders made of hunger, and humans who learn that distance plus coordination can erase a whole community. Jebel Sahaba is not the beginning of cruelty, it is the moment cruelty starts keeping records in bone. So here is the verdict as the dust settles on your imagined riverbank. The cost is counted in bodies that carry more than one wound. The cost is counted in children who never hold weapons. The cost is counted in broken arms raised in defense, in ribs punched through by stone points, in lives ended not by chance, but by repeated intention. A community's future collapses in the mud, and the river keeps moving as if it never notices. But the mirror rises next, and it does not ask for comfort. Do you see the same pattern today? Pressure tightening, resources shrinking, groups blaming other groups, distance tools making harm easy, coordination making harm efficient? Do you feel how quickly a normal night becomes a crisis when someone decides that erasing a community solves a problem? The legacy question is not about ancient names, because names vanish. The legacy question is about the moment before the arrow falls, when fear offers two paths. One path turns strangers into targets. The other path holds the line against that transformation. Imagine standing on that bank again, hearing flint click like teeth in the dark. You see the ridge. You feel the watched air. You do not know if escape exists. You do not know if mercy exists. You only know a choice exists somewhere, inside someone, before the volley. So the question remains, ungoogleable and unavoidable. When survival feels scarce and the world feels smaller, what choice is made in your own chest? Do you become the hand that coordinates the arrows, or the voice that refuses to let fear turn planning into slaughter?